The Dr. Terri Show is presented by Evexias Health Solutions. Evexias Health Solutions is an emerging leader in the integrative medicine on a mission to positively impact people's lives through the transformation of healthcare. Evexias educates and trains practitioners on the new, innovative, integrative therapies that support a preventative care model that drives vitality as you age. You can learn more about Evexias Health Solutions and many of the healthcare topics we discuss on the Dr. Terri Show at evexias.com. That's EVEXIAS.com, as well as find a provider near you. Now here's today's episode. Hey there, welcome back to the Dr. Terri Show. Today, we're going to talk about probably the number one thing that most patients that walk through our doors want to know is, why can't I lose weight? And what do you have in your bag of tricks to help me lose weight? So we're going to talk a lot about that today. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how did we get here? You know, if you look back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, we didn't have this problem so much. Obesity was the exception, not the norm. What's happened to food? What's happened to our bodies? What kind of fads are going on right now? And should I jump on that fad? And how long should I stay on that fad? And really, what can I do to make some changes that are lifelong and not just a temporary stopgap solution? So join us for the conversation. Hey, everybody, welcome back, and thanks for joining me again. Today, we're going to talk about a big conversation that probably every single female and 50% of males that come through our clinics and clinics of all the doctors that we trained, number one complaint after fatigue is, why can't I lose weight? Weight gain, right? It's a big conversation, and it always has been, especially over the past, I don't know, probably 50 years. Why is that? You know, and what's happening in our society, in our world? What's happening with it? I mean, this is another conversation. I say it every time. We've got this core conversation that has a lot of spokes to this wheel, right? That we can talk about. But let's just kind of, peel it back to what's happened in our society, in our world, really, over the past, several decades that's impacted this conversation. I'll start with one of the first things that's a really important conversation to have is that type 2 diabetes, which used to be called adult onset diabetes, we don't call it that anymore because in the last 10 to 15 years, we actually have 1 out of 8 children are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. Why is that? Well, it has everything to do with food and our diet, what's happening, right? There's genetic things that are happening, shifts in our DNA that are making us more prone to obesity in this country. And if we peel it back even further, when did this start? Well, you look at timelines, from probably probably post World War II and getting on into the, 60s and then in the 70s, definitely into the 80s, as we became a more work-focused society. Women were going back into the workplace, and how can we manufacture food faster? What can we do to make the home life more convenient for working moms? In walks processed foods, different things that are quick meals. I remember in my own house when we got a microwave, it was a big deal. That was probably, I thought we had hit the big time. This is before CD players, if you even know what a CD player is, if you're listening. Microwaves were a big deal. I went to a microwave cooking class with my dad. We made a pork roast with some cherry thing on it. I'd never forget it, So everything was microwaved. Well, it kind of all started then, and then the mass production of food kind of started shifting things. We started utilizing more antibiotics in our meats. We've started to genetically modify our grains. We started to use more pesticides on our crops. because we needed those crops to grow and produce and provide food, right? So all of these little changes that we've made over the past several decades have really impacted the health in our society. And it's global, but let's just talk about, the U.S. You can look at trends in obesity just get up and up and up. And then, pretty much in the 70s and 80s, sugary snacks and drinks became the norm. When I was a child growing up, if we got a package of M&Ms, it was a big deal because my dad would go to the local convenience store to get his cigarettes because, back in the day, all of our parents smoked. It was a normal thing to have a cigarette burning in every room. But we would just keep our fingers crossed in the car waiting for him to come out if he brought us some candy. I mean, it was that special of a deal. Well, now you go to an office supply store and there's just rows of sugary snacks and it's kind of the norm. And then where are they strategically placed? Down low. So your little kids can go, I want this, I want that. It's all thought out. There are no accidents. I couldn't believe it when I used to work at a grocery store when I was a teenager, and the bakery, a newfangled technology they had was let's pipe in these delicious smells from the bakery. So right when people walk through the store, they smell the sugary cakes and they're drawn to the bakery, right? So there's all of these subtle things that are coming at us that make us want to get that dopamine hit that sugar gives us. So that's part of it. What's happened with food, what's happened with marketing of food. Our kids are so marketed to. I remember I'm going to keep telling stories of when I was a kid. I'm sorry, it's going to hopefully not bore you. But when I would watch Saturday morning cartoons, all the commercials for Fruity Pebbles and, all these sugary laden cereals, but they were fortified with 9 essential vitamins and minerals. So that made my mom feel real good about buying those things, right? So parents are marketed to, kids are marketed to. The biggest thing that we're marketed to is just that it's healthy. It's gluten-free. I cracked up the other day. I saw a bottle of some sort of juice, gluten-free on the front of it. Well, of course it's juice. Why wouldn't it be gluten-free? But it's just pay attention to this, right? But what it didn't say on the front of the bottle is has the equivalent of 32 teaspoons of sugar in one serving. These are the things that I'm hoping that after we have this conversation today, that you'll kind of start maybe looking at labels a little bit differently, looking at food a little bit differently. So the why is important to understand. Why has it become a big deal? Fast food industry is huge. It's the 99-cent super value menus, unfortunately, are a real problem because we're one doctor that I was speaking with about this, said he termed coined the phrase that, we're overfed and undernourished. It's so true. We're overfed and undernourished. So the why behind it is important. What we're eating is very important, but understanding that sometimes what you think might be a healthy choice might not be so healthy. Now, I'll give you some tips about how to figure that out because, we're in a hurry sometimes. This morning, on my way here, I had a little bar that I had to open up because I didn't really, have time to make a healthy, nutritious breakfast, and I'm one of those that doesn't like to eat breakfast, but then you hear, it's the most important meal of the day, all of these things. So all this information's coming at us, but really our bodies were designed super intuitive and we kind of know what works, what doesn't work, what feels good, what feels good. Food should give you energy. It should help your brain work. It's supposed to sustain you and not make you feel like you want to just go sit back on the couch and just kind of do nothing, right? So going back to when it all started, what's happened to food in this country? What is it doing to our bodies? What's it doing to our digestive systems? How much inflammation is it causing? That's a really big part of the conversation. The other part is, okay, we're here. What do we do about it? There's a lot of fads. There's a lot of trends happening. One of the number one things, of course, I'm a hormone doctor. Hormones are a big part of it. But hormone deficiencies can play a role in your metabolism. Thyroid plays a big role in your metabolism. Testosterone plays a big role in your metabolism. When your testosterone is low, you don't build muscle as much. Muscle burns fat. Muscle is the currency of aging. I love that term. We can talk a little bit more about muscle and exercise and all of that stuff. But let's just say you're one of the millions of Americans or people globally, not even just this country anymore, that is plagued with some extra pounds you want to shed. And you've heard about some of these new amazing things like what they call are the GLP-1 receptor agonists. That's a big fancy word for medications that help with insulin resistance. One of the generic forms of those medications that's been around for quite a while is semaglutide. So I want to talk a little bit about that because there's a lot of this stuff being prescribed nowadays. I'm always going to take you back to the root cause, though, but let's talk about the temporary stopgap solutions to this problem. And are they good? Are they bad? What should I look for, etc.? But again, these medications have really been a game changer. In my clinics, I never prescribed weight loss medications previously until a few years ago when these medications came out because they really work. What they were intended for was type 2 diabetes. And these medications were designed, so semaglutide, tirzepatide, there's a new one coming out called retatrutide. And what these medications were intended for was insulin resistance. So what happens over time is as we continue to eat so much sugary processed foods, it sends our pancreas and our insulin receptors kind of into haywire. And we become resistant to insulin. Now, let's first talk about what's insulin's job in the body. Well, insulin is secreted by the pancreas when you eat a meal and there's some glucose something has to be done with it, right? Whether that's healthy forms of glucose, like from healthy carbs, vegetables, fruits, things like that, or whether it's from the Trente Frappuccino that you drank on your way to work. Doesn't matter which form it is, but insulin is pumped out into the system. And over time, because that system is constantly stimulated, a patient can become resistant to the insulin and they start storing all of that excess glucose, first and foremost in their liver. It's called fatty liver, which is a big, big problem. And of course in our fat cells as fat, and insulin resistance turns into type 2 diabetes, and then patients are needed medications to control their type 2 diabetes. Well, this is where these GLP-1s came on market. Victoza was one of the brands that first came out a decade or so ago. And what they noticed in the clinical trials was 100% of the diabetics on this medication lost weight. Ding, 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 ding. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. The weight loss industry in this country alone, but globally, in fact, it's a multi-billion-dollar industry. So now the next generations of these medications that came on market started going through FDA trials for weight loss. And so now we have these weight loss medications. You might have heard of some of them, Ozempic, Mounjaro, and again, they are great medications. However, the problem with them when you're talking about weight loss is most practitioners that are prescribing them are prescribing them just like every other medication that we get. Here's your medication for your problem. Have a good day. No conversations are being had on why you have the problem in the first place. And this is the big gap that I see in a lot of prescribers that are giving these medications and patients that are getting them is all they're doing is band-aiding a problem that has a root cause. And these medications for weight loss were meant to be a temporary stopgap solution to help you lose the weight. And while you're losing the weight, you're changing your lifestyle. You're implementing healthier habits. You're changing your diet. You're maybe even moving your body around a little bit more. Now, granted, there's the whole, thing about I'm overweight. I don't have the energy. I don't feel like getting up and going and exercising. The other thing that having excess weight does and higher cortisol levels does is it impacts your testosterone levels. right? There's a direct correlation between being overweight and testosterone levels. And when your testosterone's low, your brain doesn't work, you're depressed, you're moody, you're anxious, you gain more weight, you sit on the couch more, you don't want to get up and exercise, you're not building muscle. So it just kind of becomes this vicious circle. So if you're someone who is on some of these medications, I prescribe them. It's one of the number one prescriptions besides the hormones in our clinics that we prescribe. They work well. But you have to also understand you need a plan to, while you're on the medications, change your lifestyle and maybe look at some of the root cause. So working with a dietitian is really important, working with a coach, a health coach, a personal trainer that has, these are all really important because it's not just about the medication. Well, let me go back to talking about how these medications work and why they've been such a game changer. They do two things. One, the first thing they do for diabetics, and this is for everybody that is overweight, has some form of insulin resistance. It maybe hasn't shown up on your blood test yet that you're a type 2 diabetic, but you have some markers that can be tested that show your insulin resistance score. This is a really important lab that if you're going to go on some of these medications that you really need to understand your insulin resistance score. That tells you how prone are you to becoming a diabetic. It's really important to watch. So what it does is it decreases, it actually increases your sensitivity to insulin. So now when you eat that meal, your body can do with the nutrients and the glucose what it's supposed to do. Instead of store it in the liver as fat, it uses it for fuel. The second thing these medications do, this is a very high level, obviously I could go way deep into a scientific conversation, but that's not for this show. The second thing they do is it actually impacts the appetite center in your brain. It tells you you're full or you're not very hungry. So you're basically not eating as much, right? So that's a big deal. If you look at the average plate of food that we get served in a restaurant, whatever, it's giant. Well, we're just not meant to consume that much food at one time. So what causes the weight loss with these medications is two things. One, you're not as hungry, so you don't eat as much, or you may fill your plate the same and you can eat about a third, and then you just like, ugh, if I eat any more, I just, just has no desire. That hedonistic dopamine hit isn't happening, which is kind of great. It's really especially great for people that are addicted to food or addicted to sugar or things like that. It's really great for that. But it also increases your insulin sensitivity. So you're utilizing that food for fuel. So that's great. But the first question I always get is, how long should I be on this medication? How long should I be on this medication? Well, you should only be on it as long as till your weight loss goals are met. And then hopefully you've instituted some lifestyle changes to maintain that weight loss. If you're a type 2 diabetic, that is a completely reversible disease process. So if you have lost the weight and resolved your insulin resistance and you don't go back to your old habits, you can actually cure your type 2 diabetes. You can do that without these medications, actually. You can do it with diet alone. Done it with many, many patients, and hormones and nutrients and things like that. So a key question is, how long do I have to be on it? Well, once you meet your goals, hopefully you can come off. Now, a lot of people don't like to do that. They like to have their cake and eat it too, literally, right? So I have some patients that like to stay on it all the time so they can have their cake and eat it too. I had one guy, I was telling this story earlier, it's kind of funny, but he had stalled out. And this happens a lot in patients on these medications or any weight loss. There's a great book by Dr. Jason Fung. He's an amazing speaker. He has all kinds of YouTube videos. He's actually a kidney doctor who got tired of taking kidneys out of diabetics. And he said, this is a preventable issue. I'm taking kidneys out of people every day. What is happening? So he started really researching and understanding fatty liver and insulin resistance and this type 2 diabetes conversation. Just type 2 diabetes uncontrolled can lead to type 1, which can lead to all of the other problems of type 1 diabetes, losing eyesight, losing limbs, losing kidneys, etc., and early death. So this is where his pain point was. And so he's kind of the guru on intermittent fasting. What he found is that when patients fasted, even from dinner to dinner or lunch to lunch, that their insulin resistance naturally came down exponentially, and he was saving kidneys. So he has a great book called The Obesity Code, The Diabetes Code. He's just one of my favorite books that I give to patients all the time to understand what's happening. Well, with these GLP-1, these medications, it's kind of forcing you to fast because you're not hungry. So you can eat a little bit of dinner at night, and then the next day you kind of aren't really hungry until maybe lunchtime. So it's kind of forcing a little bit of fasting. So a lot of great things are happening when you're fasting in the body. And so, but you have to kind of take it back to this, what's the root cause? So changing the lifestyle, changing what you eat. So this patient of mine said, I don't understand this medication really isn't working anymore. What can I do? And I said, well, you probably should get an elbow brace, And he just kind of looked at me really funny. And he goes, what do you mean an elbow brace? I was like, an elbow brace. So you can't get the fork to your mouth, an elbow brace. And he just kind of looked at me and started laughing. I wouldn't say that to just anybody, but we had a really good relationship. And he said, so you're telling me I just need to eat less? And I said, yes, I'm telling you need to eat less. And so that's a good lesson to learn about these medications or any diet is they work for a little while and on average about 6 months. But if you didn't change your lifestyle and you don't keep tricking your body, you're just going to gain the weight back. And this is a big thing that Dr. Fung writes about in his book, is about how no matter the diet, and there are clinical studies on every Mediterranean diet, low-fat diet, low-carb diet, keto diet, now the GLP-1s, which is basically a combination of a lot of that. But they all work. Every single one of them works for about 6 months. And then the body does this cool thing. And it's called homeostasis. It finds the sweet spot and it adjusts. So if you're intermittent fasting, you're like, I'm going to intermittent fast. I'm going to do, 8 on and 16 off. There's all these trend words in the intermittent fasting world. Like I'm going to eat for 8 hours, or I'm going to have a feed time and I have fast time. Okay, great. What's going to happen at about the 6-month marker? Your body will have adjusted to that, and your metabolism will actually come down. And all of a sudden, the weight's coming back on. What's happening, right? So one of the things he talks about, and I've seen this in my own body composition, in my own journey, and he talks about it in many of his patient stories, is you have to constantly keep tricking the body. If you're going to fast, fast different time frames on different days. If you're going to do ketogenic, do keto for 4 days and then eat carbs for a day. Eat pasta. You have to constantly be, if you're exercising, I'm going to do HIIT. I do HIIT every day. Okay, eventually HIIT's going to be less effective. Do HIIT one day, do strength training one day, take a walk one day, take a break one day. You know what I mean? So you've got to constantly keep your body guessing. All of these are healthy measures, but if you do the same thing all the time, what we see is your body adjust and because the body is designed to put out the least amount of effort possible, wants to expend the least amount of energy. So that's kind of how that works. So when you're taking it back to these medications for these GLP-1s, semaglutide and those kinds of things, you can eat through the appetite suppressant part of that. You just keep eating your Bluebell every night. Instead of a pint, eat a half pint. It's still there. I had one patient that couldn't understand why her weight loss had stalled. I was like, all right, let's just walk me through your day. She listed out all her meals. Sounded great, so healthy. And I said, well, what are you drinking? Are you drinking water? Oh, I drink about 8 Dr. Peppers a day. Kidding me. Okay, let's see. Dr. Pepper, 1 can has about 36 teaspoons of sugar. So would you sit and just eat 36 teaspoons of sugar? She couldn't understand why her type 2 diabetes numbers weren't changing, and she stalled out at only 10 pounds of weight loss, right? I mean, you got to kind of think about these things and take a step back. So what's the root cause? How long should I be on these medications? So a good weight loss program, whether it's going to be the semaglutide, the GLP-1 program, or the next fad that comes along, is going to encompass not only that Band-Aid, that stopgap solution to help whatever the immediate problem is, but it's also going to encompass some dietary changes, some lifestyle changes, bringing exercise back in slowly. You have to take it a step at a time. If somebody told me, or, if I'm going to tell a patient, you have to stop drinking coffee, stop drinking wine, stop eating pizza, stop. Most people go, forget it. I'll just be this way. Right? I mean, it's too much. So start with one thing. So the patient with the Dr. Peppers, I said, can we take that down to 4 a day? Let's start there, and then maybe next week we'll take it down to 3. And eventually I did get her down to none. And it was amazing how much better she felt. Same thing with diet drinks. I could talk a lot about diet drinks, but diet drinks are worse than sugar drinks because the chemicals in them stimulate your insulin just like sugar does. And it's now you've got a chemical piece that your body is having to figure out what to do with. So we don't see any more, and this was a big problem, whenever Diet Coke first came out. I remember when it was, probably in the 90s maybe, but we saw a tick up in diabetes, because this is what do we do? Like, I would have my Snickers and my Diet Coke, it's going to cancel each other out. I heard that so many times. It doesn't work that way. So the diet drinks actually cause a lot more inflammation, and the whole problem with insulin resistance is actually worse. So there's other things that we could drink, like water, things like that. But the point is, the takeaway is, really what I want you to take away from this is, have a plan. Have a plan for, I'm going to start this medication, I'm going to start this program for X amount of time. But what am I changing so I don't regress in 6 months? So that's plan number 1. Looking at what can I take away today that I could live without? Can I take my, 3 big gulps a day down to 1? Things like that. Just start low, go slow, because every incremental little change is going to make a big, big difference. And have a plan for when you're going to go off those medications, and have a plan for what the next part of your weight loss journey is going to be. And with that, I am going to say goodbye today, and we will continue this conversation next time.